I always liked learning new things. If it's a new language or a new framework or a new database, technology keeps advancing. And if you're not comfortable, if you're scared of learning something new, that is even more reason to go out and do it.
Hi, Fernando. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
I'd love to start with an introduction. Could you share a bit about yourself and what you do?
I'm Fernando Doglio. I'm originally from Uruguay, but right now I'm currently living in Spain, Madrid. I've been part of the industry for the past 20 years, more or less. I worked with technologies on several fields, from web development with the classic, PHP, JavaScript, HTML, and CSS combo, up to now with cloud platforms, big data technologies like Hadoop, PySpark, a lot of Python, a lot of JavaScript, and Node.js as well. That's been my career from the professional side, jumping from web into big data, and now marrying both worlds. 99% of all web platforms are actually powered by scalable, highly available, cloud-based platform. So I'm essentially kind of right in middle, trying to help both worlds and both teams work together.
That's great. And could you share a little bit more about the type of teams you work on?
All types. You have the classic heavy data engineering team, which is composed of mostly data engineers working on ETL projects and ETL pipelines, sorry, and with a lot of Python, a lot of PySpark, or in cloud platforms, and then you also have the more eclectic group with your front end group inside it, working with React or Vue, and then interacting with back end developers, and also them interacting with some platform engineers or data engineers who are also processing data. I mean, honestly, the type of group is endless. The type of group you can have in this environment, because it all depends on the type of application you're working on, and the complexity it has. But I personally like to have the right roles for the right section of the platform you're building. Essentially, I don't think that a single type of developer can specialize in everything. And while they can do everything, I like to have people who are specialized in, I don't know, data processing and API design and microservices and front end. That way they can bring in that extra experience. That is personally the best type of group I like to work with, the eclectic type. And you add on top of that like your QC, your quality. If you have that kind of roles within the company, not every company has them, you can create very nice and interesting projects with that kind of team.
That makes sense. And it sounds like you've had quite an array of experiences working with different technical teams. And
Yeah.
you've written about this topic, and we'll get into that later in the show. But could you share a little bit about your latest book and some of the other books you've written?
Yeah, absolutely. So far, I've written 8 books, all technical books with different publishers. Most of them are related to with JavaScript, Node.js, Dino, regular expressions. I kind of fell in love with JavaScript several years ago, and I've been trying to help as much to spread the knowledge about it, because I really think the language is misunderstood. But the latest book I'm working on, that's already written and it's already being published and actually is accessible online through Manning's early access program. It's called the Skills of a Successful Software Engineer, and it covers everything back coding that you need to be a successful software engineer in this industry. I'm talking about the right set of soft skills that you need, what it means to go through the selection process for a company, and what it means for you to be a candidate, and also what you should look for within a company. The hiring process is actually sometimes thought of as something that only you go through. As a candidate, you are letting others know you and get to know you, and get to see how much you know, but it's actually it should be both ways experience. You are letting others know you, but the company is also supposed to be letting you know them. In that process, there are a lot of misconceptions, potential pitfalls, or things that you need to listen for to understand if that company is right for you or not. So the book tries to follow the logical path that you will go from the point where you decide you want to start coding to getting your first job, working, as part of a team for the first time, understanding what you have to take into consideration when you're coding for with other people, not just for yourself, and eventually up to what it means to lead a team, and why your team lead or your manager is like that and is asking for things like time tracking or issue tracking and things like that that are usually consider like extra tasks or things that are not necessarily useful for the developer. But anyway, the book tries to show you every angle of it, of the profession, without going deep into coding, because it's not really a coding book. Coding can be the essence of the book is that coding can be picked up anywhere, YouTube, online, Udemy, or articles everywhere. I'm trying to cover everything else that is either not covered by anyone or covered but spread out into different authors, different articles. I'm trying to put it all together in a single guide.
That's amazing, and we'll definitely need to link to access to the book in the show notes for this, and make sure that's available to our listeners. And maybe just a teaser, some highlights from that. What would you say are some of the most common misconceptions that a candidate misses or doesn't ask a potential employer before taking a job there in a technical role?
For instance, asking about the overtime policy. That is something that you usually don't ask about. And if you don't listen carefully to what your interviewer might say, you will probably miss out on potentially a company that is having daily overtime, or having people working over the weekend every week. um, I went through it. I mean, my first internship, we used to work every Saturday. We had free lunch, as if that was a perk. So a lot of things like that, that they will mask it as a perk when it's actually something that is not favorable to you, or the classic, saying of a company showing themselves as a family, telling you, no, we're a family here, we work as a family. And that is one of the biggest no-nos, that if you hear that from a company that you're interviewing with, my personal recommendation, is to just get up and run away. Because I mean, a company cannot be a family. It just doesn't work like that. I mean, your father is not going to fire you if you're not performing, but they will ask. The classic company saying this will try to ask a lot of things from you, because you're a family, and you owe it to them. But when you try to do the same because you want to take, I don't know, extra days off, or you want to raise or whatever, they'll have to comply to rules. I mean, and not because they're evil, but just because there are a legal organization that they have to abide by the laws and the rules, and the industry itself. So they cannot break every rule just because you're asking for it. But you, on your personal life, you're able to do that. Uh, so that kind of thing, that's kind of some of the things I cover in the book, and try to go into why those things are not really necessarily good things, and you should be listening for those key words when you interview with a company.
Very interesting, and I think that there's going to be some very helpful nuggets in that in the book. So we'll definitely have folks check that out. Now, you yourself have also worked in a variety of different organizations. What are some of the biggest differences between a startup from a for a technical role versus a large company?
I think the biggest difference is that when you're working for a startup, you you have to do everything, or rather, you will wear multiple hats. You won't be just the developer working on, I don't know, backend, or you won't just be your front end developer. You will usually go to backend. You'll turn to full stack. You'll do some design probably, or UX, or you'll tweak things. You'll probably also be like, I don't know, acting as a DevOps, deploying, configuring CI/CD, things like that. I went through it. And it's normal because small startups especially, they don't have the budget to keep all those roles in parallel for a long period of time, so they take advantage in a good way of the extra skills you might have picked up on your way to learning things, whether the big company, the consulting company with 500,000 employees worldwide, um, they don't have a problem to just hire people. So they will have your tester, your automated tester, your specialized DevOps in Linux, your special API designer, your every single role that you might think of will be there. So it it's a good thing because it gives you the chance to specialize in whatever you want to do. Everything else that you don't really know about gets done by someone who actually knows what they're doing. When you were in the startup, you maybe you were doing the production deployments, and you were doing a great job because you actually learned how to do it, uh, went through some tutorials. But the minute you get something that doesn't work, you have to spend, I don't know, 3 days troubleshooting it. While if you actually had someone who specialized on DevOps, that would have been fixed in 2 minutes. The configuration was wrong, and they would have picked it up because they had that experience in the past, and you didn't. That is the biggest, I think, the biggest issue difference when it comes to the type of work you'll be doing, and it gives you also the ability to switch from one area to the other, and specialize in that area as well. On the startup, you're doing everything or several things at the same time. Jack of all trades, master of none. Consulting, big company, wherever, you're able to say, "Well, I'm a master of, I don't know, backend right now, but tomorrow I want to start, I don't know, doing web development because I don't know, front end." You can jump into that other team, and not having to worry about who else is going to do that backend job that you are doing. Someone else will be hired in your place. No worries. You can specialize now in front end, in React or whatever. That is the flexibility that I personally love about big companies. You can choose the career path you want. Usually, every single role you might think of available for you. And when there is a new project, you get to pick, or sometimes what you're going to be working on, if as if you were just jumping from startup to startup.
Sounds like a key takeaway would be obviously a larger company, more opportunities to explore things that you like, and maybe not have so much pressure on yourself to be that jack of all trades. When something breaks, there's no one else to go to in a startup in many cases, and you have to sort of figure it out. So, depending on your personal style, what kind of pressure levels you're looking for, work life balance, those all might inform big versus small company.
Thinking back to what I said, you can clearly see that I'm biased towards working for bigger companies because that's been what I've done in the past several years. But I know there are others who like the smaller teams, and that kind of shopping from one problem to the other without being just one, a number inside a huge company.
Now, I'd love to even wind it back and remember back to when you were just starting out in your career and developing some of these skills, and really finding your passion. And obviously, you mentioned JavaScript is your favorite, I guess is the
Yeah.
way to put it. But how did you approach choosing that particular language, and how did you approach deciding where to specialize when you were early in your career?
Well, that's funny because I didn't. The companies I work with chose that for me. I jumped from startup to startup so many times that I got to experience different technology and different type of projects. I went from PHP to Ruby on Rails to Python to JavaScript to eventually Node.js. Um, I did some Perl in the middle as well. So I kind of got to see a lot of different things. And eventually I got to a big consulting company that allowed me, like I said before, to pick that. What do you want to work with? What kind of projects would you like to develop? And by then, I had seen different languages, different ways of working, and I got to pick Node.js eventually, coupled with cloud and big data as well. So it was a bit of Node for microservices, but a lot of other things as well. But the point is, I didn't really decide, well, I've done enough PHP. Now I want to try Ruby. I just was fed up of PHP and the company I was working with. So I just decided to jump into the next company without even knowing what they were working on. Eventually, when I got in, I found out, well, they're working with a little bit of PHP and a little Ruby. I picked up Ruby, and so I did with the other technologies. If you try enough programming languages, you'll realize that it's just a matter of adapting your syntax and maybe a bit of the paradigm that you're using. But usually, it's just learning a new syntax. So when you go through several of them, it's a lot easier to pick up new ones. So I just never really had a problem switching companies because if I didn't know or didn't have experience with exactly the technology that we're using, I would just pick it up. And through that process, I got to see so many things that eventually I got to pick up what I wanted to. It was like when I got to the first company, they literally said, "Well, we have this project for you. Start working here." Eventually, I got to specialize in Node, and it was like the natural path.
What gave you the confidence to be able to believe that you could learn the new syntaxes? How did you? Was it just by trying it you felt that confidence, or did you have any methods that you used to give yourself that extra tolerance to make that leap?
I taught myself programming when I was 14 years old. I always liked learning new things. And I think I actually, in the book I wrote, I highlight that as one of the key uh, characteristics that every developer should have. Um, as part of our industry, we're always learning new things. Whether if it's a new language or a new framework or a new database, the technology keeps advancing and should be natural for you to want to learn new things. That came natural to me in the sense that I taught myself C when I was 14, then C++. That was before I got my first job, and so to get my first job, I had to jump from C++ to PHP. And I picked it up, actually learned how to program PHP through experience and through asking around to my colleagues. But the point is, if you're not comfortable, if you're scared of learning something new, that is even more reason to go out and do it. It doesn't have to be through resigning and getting a new job. You can just pick it up in your off time and try new things. It should be a common practice among developers to try new languages, to try new technologies, to see how the same thing that you're doing every day is done in a different language that you've never picked up. Because that exercise will give you a different point of view of how to solve the same problem that you're solving every day, and that can give you even a better way to solve it. You can pick up a lot of different things through that experience. One of the few technical books I read, which stayed with me forever, I think it was from the Pragpub publisher. It's called Seven Languages in 7 Weeks. It's my favorite book about programming because it shows you literally seven different languages that are completely different paradigms, different use cases. But to me, it opened my eyes to so many different possibilities that I didn't know about. So since then, I've been trying to always stay up to date.
For somebody who's learning coding later in life, including maybe they're working in a role at a company like Accenture and take some courses, take a class, learn data science nights and weekends over a few years. And how do you suggest folks that develop their skills later in life approach this kind of thing? Is it the same playbook that you might use as a 14-year-old in terms of diving in, reading about it, or are there other differences for someone later in life?
Clearly, when you're 14 years old, you have a lot more free time, and that that's good for you for learning. But I think that the key here is not the free time, but to find the best way that you learn. Essentially, understand the best process through which you learn. Everyone learns differently. Some people are more visual. Some people are more learn through reading, learn through watching, learn through doing. I can read a whole book, but if I don't test and try the examples and fiddle with them, I can really cement the ideas in my brain. So the moment you learn, you understand how you learn. I think that's the key to then focus on, maybe, I don't know, 30 minutes a day. It doesn't take more. It's just if you do that, if you do it, essentially you have to optimize the way you're learning to make sure that that little extra time you have will have the highest impact in you and in your skill that you're developing. So I think that that's the key, not necessarily saving 3 hours a day, but just 30 minutes a day and doing it in the best way you can. Find the right videos, find the right, I don't know, author, or whatever. Find the examples, find the right people to ask. There's a lot of communities online that will help you also with questions and reviewing your code and so on. So this definitely, I think that that's the key. Understand how you learn.
That's great. And I'd be curious to get a sense for some of the key attributes or traits that you look for in potential candidates when they interview, including understanding how well they know their syntax and their how tight their skills are, but also how they can work with a team and triage problems and kind of get stuff done without needing a lot of help. So what are some of the attributes that you look for in new candidates?
Of course, depends on the type of role you're looking for and why you're looking for them. But in a generic scenario, I try to not focus on the technical side. Um, the first thing I try to understand is if this person has a sense of humility, essentially. If they are open to being wrong, if they are open to saying, I don't know how to answer that question. Uh, or if instead they'll try to guess it, or maybe they won't say no, I don't know, but they will try to reason and get to answer based on other clues that you can give them. That's great. But if you're close and you don't really let me see that you're not perfect, then that's a big tell for me that you probably will have issues working as part of the team, because clearly you're not always going to be right. And especially so if you're just getting started, if you're a junior, if you're interviewing for a junior role, I think that there's a lot more value for a junior role to say, I don't know, than to just try to guess it. Or even worse, now that we're doing a lot of interviews online, try to find the answer, during the interview, which I've had cases as well. In programming, it's never about knowing the answer, it's just knowing who knows the answer, or and then being able to get to that piece of information, either through asking a colleague or through looking on watching searching online or wherever. But the key here is that if you don't accept that, if you're not open to being corrected, then we definitely have a problem. You might not, you might not um, get. I don't like coding interviews. I don't like long uh, coding assignments to take home and then give me your code, and I don't usually go through candidate's GitHub account or anything. I just have a conversation with them. I will obviously ask technical questions, but the key is, if they answer somewhat right, but they use their own words, they don't, recite in the book or anything, then that has a lot more value because that means they are understanding even half of it, uh, instead of just repeating from memory. That's kind of what I look for when I'm interviewing, when I'm deciding to hire someone.
Well, that's great. And I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to come on the show. And for every show, we ask the same set of questions to each guest. And so I wanted to kind of move into that phase and kind of spotlight on a bit of your background. So the first question is, if you could give yourself 10 years ago a piece of advice about how to better prepare your career to be successful or learn a new skill, what would you tell yourself and why?
In the line of everything I've been saying, to keep learning. 10 years ago, I hadn't really understood the power that learning new different things, even if it's just a little bit, had in my experience. I eventually realized that, and eventually tracked that. The impact that it had. Eventually, going thinking back to that time where I was jumping from company to company. Keep learning, learn new things, even if it's just to see how it is. You will learn a lot through it.
Love that. And if you could share maybe a quick personal story of somebody who actually helped you personally to succeed with your career. So it could be a mentor, maybe an old boss or colleague. Anything you can share?
I know boss. He was the engineering manager for the startup, and I was 20 years old back then. And every moment I had that everything, something went wrong, something production broke, I would stress out a lot. It was a lot for me being 20 years old to be that stressed out. And this guy would just be so calm and mild. It was never a big issue. We'll solve it. We'll figure it out, and don't worry. Eventually, having a conversation with him, he told me, I had two kids. There are a lot worse things that can happen in life than a production breaking. That kind of clicked in me, and now that I have two kids myself, I've seen it. Everything can be on fire, and I don't mind. We'll just figure it out. We'll solve it eventually. There is a lot of stress and burnout that happens because you can't really separate life, your working life, from your personal life. And that conversation I had with him kind of clicked and allowed me to kind of put a wall, in between both worlds, and allowed me to see eventually that there is a lot of things that can go wrong, that are not work related, that are much worse than something not working, or a bug in your system. I mean, you're gonna be yelled at. You're gonna be, your customers are gonna be mad. Your client is not gonna say that they don't want to pay you. There's gonna be a lot of problems, but none of them are gonna be as important as whatever is happening in your life. So that kind of learning got me through a lot, actually.
That's amazing. And my last question for you is, if, looking forward for the next 10 years, what are some of the most important skills, themes, categories, or even a specific programming language that people should learn if they're trying to break into a technical career?
I can't really speak to technology because technology is changing every day. 2 months ago, 3 months ago, Web3 wasn't even a thing, and now everyone's talking about Web3 and NFTs and crypto. And um, I I don't want to focus on that because that is the kind of the top of the wave right now, and everything, it looks like it's going decentralized and in that direction right now. And in 5 years, it's gonna be AI breaking into our coding experience, and in 10 years, it's gonna be quantum computing. Everyone's gonna be doing it. I don't think it makes sense to make a path for the next 10 years of your career right now. Instead, I would focus on what I've been saying, learning how you learn, understanding the best ways, the best sources of information for the industry you're working with, who has the best tutorials, who's giving you that insight that you don't get otherwise. um, trying to dip your toes into different technologies, even if you're not going to be working on them tomorrow. Those different point of views will give you the tools you need to adapt with the technology, because technology is going to change, if it's going to evolve. And if you don't have the mental elasticity to keep on learning, you're going to be left out, without a career. Essentially, you're gonna be working in whatever is equivalent of COBOL right now, in 10 years. And yes, there are people working in COBOL right now making a lot of money, but there's just like 10 in the world. I don't know. If you want to stay relevant, the first thing that you need to do is you have to understand you're going to be learning throughout your life, your career, and improving the way you do that. That is the top skill you're going to be needing.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I think you've shared a lot of really, important themes and topics. And I think people would really benefit from reading your books. And we'll make sure they get linked. How can people learn more and connect with you?
They can Google me. Yeah, that's what I always recommend. Trying to be active on Twitter. So my Twitter handle is deleteman123. You know, kind of, but that's all historic reasons. That's my Twitter handle, and I'm also actively publishing on Medium.com. Find me there by my name. I usually publish every week an article about software development, or something related to it, or technical writing and so on. So, and I try to target my articles to junior developers or people trying to learn the basics.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, and we'll speak again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. It was fun.